Good morning from BG Gallery. We're here for a panel discussion on Thomas Whitaker Kidd's curated exhibit, Indecent Exposure. How are you doing this morning, Thomas?
Waking up well, I think.
Great. So I'll do a walkthrough of the show as an introduction. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you were coming from and this gorgeous show you curated here.
Yeah, it started out by just looking, so I thought maybe just having a pan of all the pieces in a quick kind of way might be a good overview to start. So I trust what I see in the work, so I didn't need to do any research except after the fact, just to get a little idea of maybe some general questions, but no big surprises with the subject matter and what I could see, although some interesting histories. So I'm just going to read a little paragraph that made me sort of contemplate how this thing came together, and it seemed to be more focused than I had first realized. So the title came to me out of the need to shape my most important thoughts that often are not welcome because they reveal vulnerabilities and bring discomfort. But when other people relate to a shared discomfort, there's a relief, a feeling of being in this human container together, this human experience like a howl in a blues song. Bringing all of these artists together in this show gives us a chance to ask each other or show each other how we move through challenges and find more joy. We can see indications of this joy in the work, the satire, the mortal absurdities of Martin Kramer, Guillermo Jimenez, and some, like myself and Kate White, harness an unconscious kind of experience, spill our guts out on the paper or the canvas. There's various, maybe we use our conscious to make certain works, or unconscious, but yeah, I'm always curious about where the work comes from. But given the sort of seriousness of a lot of the content, I like to ask about, like, where does the joy in making this work come from? What drives you to make this work? What gets you up and going again? So that's a question to anyone there. Any of our artists, I should say.
Well, for me, Nilay, the drive is to release. And it really is a sense of therapy, as maybe cliche as that is, but there is like a initial spark, and whether it's internalized ideas or things from observation, they kind of come together. And it is a sense of relief when I'm done. And that's kind of how I know when I'm done with the painting, is when there is this sort of sensation of calm that occurs.
Well, I'm a very introspective person, and I've always wanted to go deep inward. And I believe that going inward brings you to what I guess Jung would call the collective unconscious, which is where all the material from all of our hearts and minds exist in a sense, and brings you into that collectivity. And that's what I like to find out occurs in my paintings. When I go that deep, then I kind of transcend the personal. And I think that then I feel part of the universal, and hopefully the viewer has some sense of that as well. So that's kind of how I find the joy, really.
For me, the drive has come from various different places along my course of painting. I mean, at times it's been to be special, or to have value, like, see, look what I did. That drive usually doesn't last very long or isn't ultimately that satisfying. Other times the drive has been because there's a story I think needs to be told that's not even necessarily consciously about me, but like, doesn't anybody see this is how this is happening? There's that drive. But for me, the like purest drive that actually brings joy and isn't just like a compensation for some pain or perceived lack. The purest joy for me is just the desire to play with form and color and symbol and discover something, to like just have fun. That is, even if the subject matter is supposedly dark, it doesn't matter. Like the artist self is almost amoral in that way. It's interested in life and materiality and engaging with it.
Do you want, Thomas, do you want to call on the different artists? Would it like,
just whoever, maybe who didn't say anything. Jim, maybe you have something to say about what drives you to make your work. I know there's a lot of labor involved. It's not like a quick and easy.
Yeah, I first of all really appreciate the inclusion of this. And for me, for this piece, this is the video animated vintage television playing in it. It was made specifically as a video for my father, who passed away in 2015. 2018, I take that back. But when he turned, in 2015, he turned 80 years old. And he has a twin sister. And we had our family doesn't commemorate much, but we had a reunion there with my dad's side of the family and his twin sister. And they played this video that you're seeing. And it was stories from my childhood, represented by the collective memory of my brothers. And you could see, these androgynous white faceless figures representing anybody, because it could have been one of my brothers that experienced that. It could have been another family member, or someone could project their own family members on this. But growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, there's this kind of anything goes sort of latchkey, free spirit childhood that I hope people connect to. And it's also something that I last shared with my father. So he's the star of all these 6 vignettes. And my brothers and I all have different memories of different events. So my father, who is, they, have their criticisms of him, of his flaws and his shortcomings, but it was really something that affects different family members in different ways. So this piece was never intended as, it wasn't even intended as art, I thought, because Tom suggested, it really fits this theme of Jungian unconsciousness. And I thought, yes, you're right. How is it going to fit a show? It's animation. And I did create this sort of retro television set. And one of his favorite owl ashtrays is a memory of my dad's chain smoking throughout this. And this is what I do more. This is my paper craft. And I've done shows over the years where I've recreated Sir Ernest Shackleton's hut and ship, where I take research and thematic aspects with a little bit of research and recreate things with painted paper. And so my background, I would just call myself a mixed media artist. And that's my background too. And this isn't really indicative of my work, but Tom really positively convinced me to show it. And I thought it does fit in the piece and fit in the rest of the show and that gestalt very well. And I hope it has a lot of humor to it. It has an entertainment value, which is not normally the meditative kind of hypnotic state that you're put in when observing artworks, which take a lot more time and contemplation. This is more in the language of Hollywood, maybe, and this is done with CGI and animation. But this recreation, I think, with the paper TV set, puts it into this parlance of illusionary. Everything then is an illusion. It's an illusion of 3 dimensions going through the spaces that were my childhood house. And I'll finish that. As I'm speaking, I am in my childhood house now. I just moved my mother with the help of my brothers into a facility in Portland. And the timing of this couldn't be any more eerie, because here I'm sitting in Elgin, Illinois, which is the suburb of Chicago, emptying out, completely emptying out all the last belongings of my mother and just liquidating it and throwing it in the trash. You know, it's like sometimes you have to do that. It's like about cleaning that aspect. So this is a very odd and very quirky and personal piece about my dad and my family dynamics, things that happened to me from a perspective. And I really appreciate to be able to show it, because it's not what I normally do in my, the background of most of my other work. So I just want to thank Tom and Om for including it.
There's a certain violence too that you don't often bring up, but I felt the tension of you and your brother being in the basement behind this door with this impending knock and the kicking open of the door, and then your father going from a more violent mental state to soothed by the music and interested. And I think growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, violence was sort of more accepted. And I went to a Catholic school and a nun grabbed me by the ear, and it was actually a really good thing, because in public school, people just left me to sort of decay in my daily ennui or whatever. So
no, this is very personal. It's like a very personal answer. If I could talk about your question of why work is created and what motivates, and this is very unique and personal, but I think I get it, because what you wrote those 2 really beautiful paragraphs about the show, and I think it was either you or Om that read some of it. I think it was you, Tom. And the second paragraph in there talked about oversharing, about does art share personal lives? So does it become trite or sentimental to do so? What is the point that it becomes like family snapshots that then are only meaningful to you? When does that point of sharing become the point of the work? But we were very terrified of my father growing up, but it was just that he wasn't violent. He never beat us or anything like that. And that's,
but he didn't run from a fight
right there. But we were scared of the way kids are scared of adults, that they aren't scared of adults today. Let me tell you. And but I think you caught on to that aspect of violence, how violence changes over the years, and their father's father was even more so their father's father, and now people are saying that language can be violence, or silence can be violence. So it's a reinterpretation of the English language. It's under constant evolution.
And Martin, the body parts in a box, those are the ones that for me raise the most questions, even though I just love to sit there and look at it and think about boxing Helena or some sort of odd movies that relate to that kind of body ownership and mutilation or whatever, but also the humor of it, the chosen body parts of a big belly or somebody's big butt in your face kind of thing.
So you can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you just turned yourself off, I think. No?
Yeah, Martin, you might be on mute possibly, or we lost you.
I think, Martin, maybe it's your headphones.
So can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So it even worked worse with the handphone. So okay. So you were talking about the motivation and of the joy and how I came to these pieces with the belly and the
Yeah. Yeah, like how did the idea come into your head? Like, where were you or what were you doing? How does that happen,
So it's a work, a conceptual work, which were created in the pandemic time, and there was a like a topic all about social distancing, and this was very much discussed. So I put this idea of distance, which is a social phenomenon, into a body, which where the parts separate from the whole body. So this is a conceptual thing where I shifted this inside a body where this person is departed in some sections where they are isolated. So I tried this as an experiment, and I thought, and there comes another thing, which is this small and tiny box where they're pressed into. So and I tried to stage that really in a very realistic way. So this is gonna be like a very symbolic expression. And then these two like the very realistic and illusional painting in the opposite to the sculpture, which is represented by this box. So there is always like the human being like in a structure, and the structure like makes a frame. And this was like the theme in this pandemic, in this pandemic situation. And so this is rather conceptual indeed. And so I developed some of us also other body parts. And so it's often in my work that I try to mingle the illusional painting and the physical appearance of sculpture. And yeah,
I like the kind of can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I like the kind of calm I get from looking at them. You're in a box, but it's a little bit like looking at the Japanese flag of a red circle in the middle, that sort of symmetrical composition.
I tried to make it really really calm, and there should be no distraction, and just like also like a bit, so you cannot escape from it. So there is no attraction or something else you can rely on. There's no dynamic thing. So you're really exposed to that, maybe over show. Yeah. So you're exposed to this. So I thought it's really dealing with the theme of your show. So I choose that.
Reminds me of when I take my cat and I put my hands and put pressure around his side of his body, and he gets calm because he's not like a cuddly guy, but that thing that people, I guess mammals have when they're squeezed and makes them calm down. Like when you maybe at a slaughterhouse too, what they do to cows before they. Yeah.
And I also thought like it's very private. So this is really maybe too private. So this is like the feeling you can have. So this even for the artist, I choose something where I thought, okay, can you show it? So how easy do I feel with that? So this is also like inclusion to the theme and to the topic. So I think I often choose a work where I little bit feel uncomfortable with. I think that makes this. It often turned out that they are the good pieces. So where you also feel a little uncomfortable, a little unsure. So
I know with my own work, the more I need to feel comfortable walking around in my everyday life, the less comfortable, well, the work that I make that's the least comfortable does the most for me. But yeah. And Guillermo, could you tell us something about the subject matter behind your work there? I was also thinking about someone who was talking about getting drunk. I can't remember, some literary person describing it, and Kate was talking about feeling important, and there was this sort of glorious description of that first glow of having some booze and feeling like I'm no longer this piece of shit that doesn't matter, and I'm not angry at all these people that did me wrong over the years, and I feel this love and importance, which I thought was pretty cool of a description of that. But it made me think of your work a bit, and mortality. But Guillermo, maybe you can tell us something about this.
Honestly, like I told a couple people when I was there, it's like I prefer to listen to the individual's perspective of the artwork. I enjoy doing the work, but I prefer to listen to the either memories or emotions or what does the work that I create produce in other people. That's what I enjoy, because I feel like it's people are like books. At least personally, I view it as that way. People are like books, and when you create a sense of a calm or an openness to them, they open up to you and they reveal things that maybe they wouldn't say out loud in public, or they wouldn't bring up just randomly. And I think that's what I was going for, especially when I created this piece. It was to say the least, it was a very dark time for me personally, and that questioning of your own mortality. What does death mean to you personally, to others? And I've always been a very big fan of mythology. Huge fan. I started reading mythology was when I was in middle school, which is probably not the best time to start because your mind is kind of tender for it, and there's so many underlying factors to it that maybe at that certain point you don't understand. But for me, mythology has always been a big influence in whatever work I do. So for me, this piece was, why are we so terrified of death? Why is death, or the topic of it, such a taboo? Like, we view it as this uncomfortable truth. We know it's there, we know it happens, but we deny it. It's like, no, we're gonna turn a blind eye to it. And for the most part, the works that I've seen about death, they're always gloomy, they're dark. There's a strange sense of sadness to them. So my take on this was, why not personify death into something else? Like, why does it always have to be gloomy or sad or destructive, whatever you want to call it? And then my emphasis was on that, like, personify death and make it into something else.
Like a metamorphosis?
Sort of, because the way I also took it was, why not personify it, and then what would death want to say? What if you could get into that kind of conversation and converse with it? What would it want? You know, because it's always vilified.
Mm-hmm. But we're partners
So
with it.
yeah, so it's kind of like, what would it want to say? What would it really think about our views of it and whatnot? So that's what my take was on it when I did this piece.
Can I ask a question? Guillermo?
Sure, go ahead.
Guillermo, were you consciously using the symbol of the butterfly as like the symbol of rebirth, or was that just a sort of an unconscious move? Because I'm like, oh, well, of course, the butterfly is, you know, the caterpillar dies and is reborn into a butterfly.
Honestly, I think in that point, I think it was more of a unconscious thing, because I had read about the whole fact that the monarch is considered like a symbol for rebirth and new life. But at the time, it just came to me. I was like, why not add some butterflies into it? And then once I kind of read into it, and I was like, oh, it's one of those things that I guess subconsciously works itself in, and you, in retrospect, you kind of see it and you're like, oh, it kind of worked itself into it.
Right. That
So
happens
that's why I
a
called
lot
it.
too. Yeah. Cool.
So that's why I kind of ended up with that name, Death Praying for Life. What would it want?
Hmm.
So that was my thing. But it was unconscious for it. It popped up and it worked with the piece, and it went from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Guillermo. And Kata.
You're welcome, kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Guillermo was actually, I met him when I was teaching a class several years ago. And it's really nice to hear him speak. And he actually gives me comfort when I bring up something that has a certain kind of negative vibe. He kind of calms me down. So I felt that already just now. Kata, so we were talking, Guillermo mentioned mythology, and I was even thinking about how, you know, growing up during the Iron Curtain and the demonization of the evil empire of Russia, and being behind that Iron Curtain, there's a certain mythology there that, you know, people like me that celebrated, even though I was in Cambridge, Mass, when the Berlin Wall came down. But being an adult then anyway, I had a friend who was rushing to the airport to go celebrate in Berlin. But your work has like a lot of layers that feels connected to that kind of character that somewhat connect, to that character I first saw when I went to your studio and saw this suicide bomber, where at first I'm like amazed by the beauty of this color. And then I'm looking at the iconography, and this funny looking dude in his living room looks a little bit like something's going on that's not quite right. But there's a certain humor to it, even though that subject matter couldn't be more distressful. I feel this in this one a bit too. And I think you sometimes talk about your background and how that maybe influenced how you might see things a little differently than people that haven't experienced much lack of freedom, so to speak. So maybe you have something you want to say that I'm overstepping here. I don't know.
Okay, but I'm a little bit shy. My English isn't good, and it's very complicated to me to declare it in German and also in English. You must ask a little bit easier question than I can.
So just
tell.
What drove you to make this piece? I think the motivation, the thing that keeps you working. I mean, it takes a long time to make this work. So there must have been this feeling that drove you to, that triggered the beginning of setting out to do this big work. It's a big, long process.
In the beginning, I have read a book from Agamben. The name is Scheiße, ich kann es gerade nicht. Okay, the title is German Angst. Yes, I think it's international.
Yeah.
International think about the German fear for future, and they are thinking much and so on. And Agamben have write a book that the name is Homo Soka. And some of the sentence, one of the sentence inside the tapestry is a Latin sentence, and I must read it in English here. The law allows equal, oh God, I can't speak this word. Revenge, as a revanche, I think, yes. You understand me?
The law.
What I say? Yes, you must say. And it's like a mirror law. Also it's eigentlich a mirror punishment in the of a poetical form. Yes, I can only say it in German. Auge Auge, Zahn Zahn. Yes, it's a mirror punishment. Yes, and all the things, they are more in the grotesque form, or the piece is more a grotesque picture. I cannot speak so much about this work, but I can't speak it in German. I think it's more for you see it, you see the title and understand what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it. I hope the people understand it when they see it, and then they understand the right title and understand what moves there. I hope it.
I feel like there's some sort of mystery that we have in ourselves where we have this thought, but maybe this opposing thought that can coexist and make sense, even though if you put it in one sentence, it would sound irrational. Conflicting things, maybe thoughts of revenge, but being against the whole concept of revenge, being against the idea of law, maybe in general. I think I used to be more of an anarchist or communist. Those two things.
Communist, no.
I mean, in the pure,
or what do you mean?
No, I mean, this is just my own thoughts of ideas that.
One moment.
But just being kind of flexible with your ideas and having them coexist where they might contradict each other. Maybe like when I'm reading about Trotsky, how he would change his ideas, which seem pretty rare with political philosophers. I think maybe it led to his demise, but that flexibility that a lot of artists have in their mind to have a concept, but create lots of layers of how other things that may not seem to fit together actually do fit together. Yeah.
I don't understand. But I think it's more humor. It's more for fun all together. It's not so strong I
Mhm.
mean, not so strong.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
I heard from you now, it's a little bit too heavy. It's not so
Mhm.
heavy. I
Hmm.
think it's not so heavy. It's more grotesque, fun.
Yeah. I mean, it looks kind of like a cartoon in a sense with the stylized figure. Uh, but this isn't just a simple-minded smiley face. It's a complicated fun, or yeah.
Complicated fun. Yes, more complicated fun. They are near on the food. Yes, it's yes.
Like a good comedy. It's has a sense of horror, but
Okay. Good.
maybe that's
Stop.
the best way to deal with horrors.
Okay.
Like going to Paris and
Only what I can show how I made it. I have sketches, and if you want, I can put it and show
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's fun. I make a sketch, and the first was this. Moment. This.
Ah. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
You, you see it, or is it in the is it spiegelverkehrt? So, and after some times, then I have the idea to make this wall, the standing under the wall. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
So that's another sketch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you see, this is weaving, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a sketch, and the sketch changing. Yes. Changing more. More.
Yeah.
And more. More.
Wow.
You see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a finger, I don't know. So, you see it?
Yeah, it's really amazing to see
No
progress.
sentence in it and so. And then I have maybe like this. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I have the idea, I make the sentence in it. So, yes. But it's another, not the same like the picture. And then I have the idea with the rock, with the river man, and the sentence there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I show you the first.
That's celebration.
First. That's the first. And that's the last.
That's quite a.
It's developed in the by making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think it's a difference between other tapestries. Nobody make it in this kind.
No, that sounds difficult.
Yes, I weiß nicht, was einfallen heißt. Sorry. I think I must stop, but my English is too bad.
Not that much better than my German. And some people know German here. So yeah, thanks. So those stages of the drawings, you can actually develop as you weave by weaving things within a sort of underlying foundation like the earlier drawing.
Was it a question?
So you can have a weaving that looks like the beginning of maybe one of those early drawings and then add to the weaving to make it more developed like the drawings showed.
But I can understand the question.
Oh, so you can change.
But I can't understand the question also in German now. What do you mean?
So your weaving process can change like your drawing.
Can change like the
The image in the weaving can change like the drawings you showed.
Naja, but when I have weaving some part that can't change.
Mm-hmm.
The weaving part can't change. I must reaction of the things that I have made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. That's a pretty,
What inside is inside.
it sounds
And I
like a,
can't see it. I move it. I move the tapestry moved. Yes, you
Mhm.
moved. You have a little. It's a little bit photo. Yes, and then it moved. It's you can't see the beginning. It have a
Mhm.
beginning and the end, but you
Mm.
can't see the beginning. I must remember, or I have to take a photo. That's all. But it's not the right color and so on.
Hmm. Thanks. That's a bit of a mystery for a painter to hear this process.
Yes, it's mystery for a painter, but I'm also a painter, and now
Yeah.
how is the difference between weaving and painting? Yes, painting is you have a layer and so and in this direction, yes, and the weaving is from the beginning to the end,
Uh-huh.
and then it's a trend. You can nothing change, and that's one of the reasons that I made this. But you can't take in the painting a painting, and then there's nothing nothing on the painting, yes. But in the weaving, you have a beginning and the end. That's good for me.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's excellent. Yeah, thanks. That explains a
I
lot.
think it's
That covers everything I was wondering, really. I mean, generally, yeah. I always have a lot of questions.
but it's the first time that I show this. This never I show this. Some people also, but I have thinking I can't speak better. I show the sketches. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. And Mary, I wanted to know something about where that almost religious type figure in the garden doing some, or at a table preparing for their garden or something is, what kind of ritual this is.
Sure. Well, this was the first painting that I made right when the pandemic started. So I was home in lockdown, and it's on top of a failed painting. So the curtains and the background behind the figure are all from the previous painting. And I think of the figure as somewhat of a self-portrait. It's kind of a referencing to this kind of existential predicament that we're always in, but was heightened by the idea that there was a virulent virus that could kill us. That was a pandemic. So I thought of Samuel Beckett's novel, The Unnameable, where an unknown narrator says, "You must go on. I can't go on. I will go on." And so I thought of this kind of apocalyptic scene kind of in the background, everything flying around, and the curtains, meaning curtains could close any minute on life. And what do we do? But we go on. And in this sense, this kind of vulnerable being is planting seeds for the future and plants for the future. That's kind of how I thought of it, actually.
Yeah, we're really
Pack it there.
thinking back then, really thinking about the future so much, where I'm not normally like that. It's always like, I can't make a plan about what I'm doing tonight because I haven't gone through the afternoon yet.
And there's so many moments like that for, the parents in Texas, how do they go on? Or the soldiers in Ukraine, how do they go on? I mean, the women in Afghanistan. I mean, and so it's such a primary moment where you say, how can I go on?
And
how
do we normalize things?
Yeah.
What is going on when we take this as just another shooting, or if you live in a violent neighborhood in LA and you're kind of used to that, gang violence.
Yeah, we sort of normalize it.
Yeah.
Moment where we really are asking ourselves. And I think, we're the only, that we know of, we're the only species that recognizes that we're going to die. And I think that gives us a lot of material in life in terms of what kind of choices we make and how we live. to have my paintings on the edge of those dilemmas that we find ourselves in around existential dilemmas and other kind of dilemmas.
Hmm.
So this would be an example of that as well.
And the smaller works you make they have a bit of a different process. It seems like a very pointed moment in unusual human history. But there's a spiritual joy. I mean, if I can use that word. I know some people are afraid of that word, but that I get from so many of your paintings. And this sort of has a seedling. I mean, I'm starting to make puns here, but a seedling of that in there.
Yeah, I think I'm always looking for something to contradict the darkness. So that could be humor, or that could be color. You know, I think someone said before, I think it was Kate who said, you know, color can be a contrast to some of the content that's going on. And so that you're, you know, I like that kind of tension between the formal and the narrative. A narrative is very important to me. All my work comes through verbal or written stories or lyrics or history or the news. And I really look for an emblematic moment in whatever that narrative is that can kind of express a lot of different things at once about the story.
So you set out even with your smaller works to convey a certain sort of theme, so to speak.
I do actually, you know, because I have a condition called aphantasia, which is the inability to see mental images in my mind. So if I close my eyes and I try to visualize you guys on the screen, it's blank.
Wow.
It's
That's
crazy.
pretty surprising.
I
would have thought the opposite.
I found out about 10 years ago. I'm like, what? No, everybody's not like me. I don't understand. But that means that I find my imagery through these kind of narratives. And then the joy for me is in part creating the visual, because I can't create it in my mind. So I can create it, you know, on a canvas. And it, you know, so that for me is really, I think, kind of a compulsive reason that I paint, actually.
So there's a focused direction you're going in. And I used to be very unfocused, and then I found myself making too many paintings of myself being hung between a couple branches in a tree when I fell out of a tree, and really dark paintings for 8 years that were hard to light. And then I thought, it's not like cool to have this sort of nihilistic, I mean, it doesn't feel good to have this so-called cool, nihilistic, I know something you don't kind of way of life. And by showing the darkest things, looking back at my childhood, I was thinking everybody must have seen, somebody get run over in the street and be underneath a car when they're 7. I thought that was normal, and other things that happened that all seemed to happen around that same time when, hiding from my violent father and my grandmother's housing projects that my mother grew up in down the street. But not defining myself by these worst moments. I look at your smaller paintings that I see so many of, and I want to be there. I want to be there. I want to go in there and have this experience.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that's something joyful. And, I think there is something deeper in us, all of us, that has an inherent joy to it. And if we can access that as well as the darkness, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nilay, there she is. I was wondering how when I looked at this painting and I saw the title, it was a little more political than, I started out being more political with my own work, like Stealth Over Harlem. It was the 80s, and the stealth bomber would fall apart in the sky, and it cost $2 billion. And Ronald Reagan was selling crack in the streets through his CIA agents to fund Central America. So that kind of stuff made me want to move to Canada. But when I look at this, I'm just immediately brought into this person's kind of peaceful hopefulness in a sense, even though that torch is detached from the Statue of Liberty. I'm just wondering what thoughts you had making this.
Yeah, well, the title comes from a Siqueiros mural in Chinatown on Olvera Street. It's called America Tropical, Oppressed and Destroyed by Imperialism.
Ah.
And so I took the latter half of that title to title this piece, simply because even the Siqueiros mural through time has been retitled. Essentially, they've taken off the oppressed and destroyed by imperialism, and it's solely known as America Tropical. So it was a way to sort of bring that back and give homage to that. And also, you know, he was a fiery painter, and he painted that mural in response to a lot of racism in Los Angeles. And at the time, the way City Hall was facing the wall that it's painted on, people in City Hall had direct view to this like really intense image. So I was thinking along those lines, and that mural has actually kind of fed a lot of the way I think about presenting images in paint. And this painting was in the middle of my turbulent COVID nomadicism. And I was kind of all over the place, moving around, shuffling around with just like a little bag and living as much as I could. And so this was in the middle when a friend in Los Angeles, I came back to LA, let me stay in their studio, and I was able to use their materials, and it's their stretched linen. There was an underpainting of theirs, another failed painting of theirs, and they let me use their materials because I traditionally paint solely in monochrome, black and white. So this is quite unique that it's a colorful painting. I've painted in color before, but it's just something that I'm not into right now, even though it's really fun to paint in color. I like painting from a place of reduced materials, and making something out of nothing is kind of my ethos. But this painting, so being in the middle of my COVID nomadicism, I was quite disgusted with, I think, a lot of behaviors and things that I had witnessed and seen, especially being nomadic. You're kind of at the beck and call in need of other people's help, you know, and that creates a lot of dark moments. And it's essentially, to me, a painting about consumption, overconsumption. It is a big mixture of ideas coming together. I was upset when I was painting it. I'd say there's some spite in this painting. It's very free form, free flowing. In general, I don't plan paintings. I just kind of start, and one leads to another, and I can sort of pre-see what I need to do. And I have fun when I paint, though, despite it maybe being from a place of spite. I like when I draw or paint, I feel like, you know, I can do full on representation if necessary. I can get playful and do more cartoony, but I just love the freedom that I feel like I can make any image occur. Like, I feel like I can do anything with painting and drawing. And so I was doing that with this and just letting things happen. Like, there's death surfing on an ocean of blood, a blood ocean potentially. And a lot of times as I'm painting, I'm sort of figuring it out. I'm like, oh wow, that's what I painted. And so it comes together in some wonderful, freakish way. And you know, this figure has the torch from the Statue of Liberty. And I was thinking like, oh, well, if the torch is on, what is it doing to the leg? So I just made these gooey, drippy things. And to me, it's burning the leg, you know? So it's really playful in that way. But it came from a place of just being sort of horrified with just consumption. The amount of, Amazon box pile ups, there's the Amazon smirk. I consider it a smirk. It's very deviant. The logo, I started playing with logos. Chick-fil-A. Like, I thought Chick-fil-A was problematic, but everyone's going there, and so just sort of responding in a way to make myself feel better. Again, like using painting as a way to release, essentially in this case, anger, I think. So I think it's great that you see optimism, which could be that relief maybe you're relating to, It's grotesque too. There's like a hot dog, thick penis thing going on, the pearl necklace action going on. It's implied as a hot dog because of the yellow and red, right? It's like mustard and ketchup. Formally too, I was playing with the sort of 3 dots you see, the emoji, the eyes. I like the idea of the repetition of the 3 mouths and lips. I was thinking of people surgically enhancing themselves as they were staying at home and potentially seeing themselves, you know, on screen often. And it seemed like there was a lot of body modification going on for the like social gaze, not just the male gaze. But so yeah, I was just trying to release that anger.
It looks like a little Bart Simpson on the shoulder even.
Yeah, like Homer Simpson. And that's kind of like, where did that come from? Because I wasn't actually a Simpsons consumer growing up. You know, even the sort of eat your cake, I was thinking of that. You know, the hand is just like smothered in this sort of primary color cake. I think that's also my response to painting in color in some way. Just abundance, you know, cutting the body, the knife is there. But again, just having fun with painting, you know.
Yeah, that was a real, I don't like social media, even though, you know, I find when I avoid it, like I'm missing out, and I go, oh, this is fun actually, yet I haven't done it in a week. And I saw that image and it was like, whoa, who did that?
Yeah, and it's quite different, I think, from the way I work. But as far as the paint application, it's quite similar to the way I work. But I think it changes so much. Like if this were a black and white painting, I think it would be so different. I was excited when you wanted to include this painting. Initially, I was a little like, oh, I don't know, because it's so different, just in the fact that it's color. But again, I'm just like anyone's idea to sort of present paintings, especially in such a special way that you have with the show. I'm always game, and would rather work with someone who has a vision than trying to dictate from my end, you know?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you're talking about just feels like a parallel type of experience that I have myself. It's hard to not have a decent amount in common when out of the, you know, tens of thousands of artworks that I look at, I wind up with these, you know, so yeah, it's hard not to react to the world when there's such pointed things that bring outrage, and I'm like walking around the neighborhood trying to decompress from watching The Handmaid's Tale. It's like, this is just too real. And like a harbinger of a Trump re-election or something. But yeah, I mean, everything is personal basically, in a like business, politics. And Picasso said everything's a self-portrait. I'm not a big fan of Picasso, but I kind of like that quote. So
yeah, and I think it relates to your show and this idea of like the inner is outside, and it's so true, in particular with this painting too, because in some way too, I wasn't happy with myself and my situation either. So that's where I was a little weary, I guess, initially too, because I didn't want this painting to seem like I was pointing a finger essentially, but in some way I am, but the finger kind of can, you know, point to myself. So I like that it is that sort of notion of the inner is the out, because it's not me necessarily being disgusted with the people and things that I've seen, even though, again, it's kind of this duality. I am also, but it's also myself, you know. I wasn't happy with where all of the places I'd been, but I was also so grateful to have access. So this was me painting a painting after not being able to paint for a year, because I had a 2-year sort of nomadicism until I came back to LA more recently in I think it was January. And yeah, it was the first time to kind of let it out. So that's kind of what happened there. I'd maintained still drawing and, you know, doing smaller, like water-based stuff on paper, but this was an explosive sort of moment.
I definitely feel a certain optimism of this upward gaze that immediately grabs me and sets me up for this reaction to all these struggles underneath.
I love that. I think that's really cute, and it's the cute kissy love emoji. So
Yeah.
I think who doesn't love when they get that or see that, you know, in response to something. So I actually really love that take.
Mhm. Yeah, I really use that a lot with my mother. She's a little bit sometimes like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but
Quick, send a kissy emoji. It'll calm
yes,
everything down.
yeah. But and yeah, that's great. And Kate, I feel like when I look at your work, there's so much revealed things. I mean, you seem like the queen of unbridled revealing in a sense. But,
Really?
and I love that. It's like I wish I was as courageous as she is, but once in a while I get there. But yeah, this mama painting and the sort of tradition, or maybe it's a medieval or ancient tradition that you talked about, the death mother.
Oh,
I don't know
well,
how important that is, but it was very shocking.
no, that's just like, you know, there's, if we're talking about Jung, there's all these archetypes, right? These various kind of configurations of energy that flow through our experience and through the culture. And the death mother is just one of them, you know, kind of carried over from, you know, early humanity when babies were killed just for sustainability, or if they weren't viable for some reason, you know, I mean, after they're born, you know. So, you know, that expresses in our lives currently as just like unhealed trauma in the mother that creates a situation for the child where you feel like your mother wants you dead, you know? So, or maybe not physically dead, but, you know, I mean, there's dynamics are going on, psychological dynamics within families. So anyway, the death mother was an archetype that I was interested in and thinking about. And so, yeah, this painting, I don't know, my process, I've loved what Mary was saying about finding, you know, in some narrative, something that's emblematic of a theme or an experience. And so this just came, often I'll just have a snapshot or see a snapshot, a photograph, found photograph or something that's like, oh, that's touching into this archetypal theme. And I should paint that. So,
yeah, my immediate reaction looking at that was, it reminds me of my father having a good time at the expense of the family, like getting drunk and being off on his boat and expecting his wife to do all these 1950 type things, and to be available and not go to college even at one point.
interesting. See, yeah. So there's plenty of room in these, in my narratives for interpretation.
But yeah, I suppose I might have been more afraid of my mother actually during the toughest times, just because of her emotional reactions to things are stronger than most people's. But but I love her for everything she turned around for in my life, getting me out of my downward spiral to possible, you know, incarceration or something as my future.
Oh, good. Well, then she that's good. You send her kissy faces.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ma.
Yeah, thanks. Pulling me out of my spiral with no rudder.
Yeah. I had a bunch of, I have a bunch of versions of this painting before it arrived to this final place, but so I wish I could show those too, but I don't know if that's,
Well, if you want to, if you have them there that you could.
Oh, I don't know. I would have to share my screen. I don't have them to hold up, so it's okay. It's okay unless you wanted me to do that. I don't care if I do that or not. In an earlier version, there was a little girl holding a cat over the water, like with
You could
the
show
sort of
it.
ambiguous.
I was just thinking you could show it. You're probably used to doing these kinds of things with these machines.
Well, if you want, I don't know where we're at with time, or it's up to you. I don't have a need to. I'm offering if you want me to, but I don't need to.
It's up to you.
How long are we supposed to be going?
I was guessing, like a lecture class, your brain gets tired after an hour and a quarter about, so maybe we have another 10 minutes.
Okay, let's skip it. I'll just imagine previous versions, a girl holding a cat. And then I'll make decisions to change the narrative, not really with any reason, not really any conscious reason, except that it's just not interesting me. It's just not, so, I mean, the orange sky with the mama words was the last move. I had that was not a sea, it was a river, and there was a whole other landscape behind. And then that got.
And it makes me think of Northern California, the landscape of being up above Arcata. Like one of the first connections I had was going to Neeland, that mountain top above Arcata, and that kind of culture with the college people that went to Humboldt with the shotgun holes in the speed limit signs on the streets from the locals that didn't go to college.
Yeah. Yes. I've been both of those people.
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about your work?
Oh, yeah, I think I probably should.
Yes.
Let's
see. And I love so this was a bit of a embracing safety in a sense of how this is like a version of my stepfather who looks kind of like that, except his nose is more of a Mideastern shape, but maybe it's a combination of me, I guess, looking at myself, and my stepfather, and how he also played a large part in kind of saving me from a demise and taught me how to drive, and actually grabbed the wheel when I was pulling out with a speeding car coming across the intersection. But also how I woke up when the car hit the curb when I was driving home drunk when I was 19, and how that was like, I thought, a chance to not kill myself and to change my ways. But then also coming back from a family party with my stepfather where he was kind of drunk, and luckily we had just a Duster with a 6-cylinder, so it could only go like 88 miles an hour tops or so, and he was flooring it to see how fast it would go, but there was no traffic and I didn't feel like in danger. So that kind of back and forth of releasing yourself and not being so afraid, but also knowing your limits, or I don't like the word limits, but just being conscious of when you feel a real danger as opposed to one that was taught to you. I feel like a lot of Americans are taught fear quite a bit. And, the sort of exploitation of city violence as a way for right-wing agendas to play out and things like that. But, so there's a hug there too. So maybe that's like my version of the kissy emoji. Someone behind this, my stepfather, giving him a hug and thanking him for his part in saving me from my daily migraines, and which I had when I was an adolescent and was put on phenobarbital, but I didn't really know the difference because it was every day, and how that turned things around. The nun grabbing my by the ear. So it's like a turnaround, appreciation of a turnaround. And maybe turning around from being an engineering student too, where I was getting really good at like drinking almost a fifth of bourbon by myself as a way of responding to studying and passing these very difficult tests that I wasn't initially prepared for. And kind of that back and forth of pushing myself to do what was expected or what I was capable of doing because I was good in math and physics. But the migraines were coming back, and his mother, my step grandmother to be specific, was the one who first got me to have a solo show at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. So it was this last push to get me to take myself seriously as an artist and to trust that. But yeah, it took a lot of failed starts to get that final decision to be an artist, really. So those are my...
Yeah, Thomas, can I ask, could you talk about the sense of movement? I feel like in a lot of your paintings, when I see them, there's this, at least for me, there's this sort of slow motion, dreamlike underwater movement that I see. But there's always some movement in your painting, whether there's one of a lady flipping over, there's some kind of action taking place, and the image is there is like the hair is, you know, blowing here in this painting, but there's always movement in your work. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I kind of noticed that after a while when I started looking around. It's like, boy, most people don't paint movement.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until I kind of noticed. And maybe it's because I'm not good at breathing. So I have to like force myself to have more oxygen. Like I got my blood test and it was like a below average oxygen level. And it's like, should I worry about that? And the doctor's like, no, you know, they're like, you'll survive. And my body temperature was 96.2. And it's like, that's below average. Should I worry about that? But so I feel like I need to move to feel like I'm healthy and I'm functioning and full of capacity. What that does with endorphins, you know, I'm not on any sort of psycho meds. What's the word? Psychoactive medication, like everybody in my family. I meditate, but yeah, I need that cathartic action to feel like I'm okay and that I have some sense of power over my well-being. You know, there's this, yeah, the longer I go without making art, the more I feel like I'm a kind of victim of circumstance in a sense. So if I go like a week without painting, I feel significantly worse. So yeah, but I also don't want it to be just like a self-help thing. There's a big social aspect of it. We're all in this world and there's a collective unconscious. I believe that very strongly. So yeah, that blend of being connected and appreciating, and like Mary was talking about having a narrative, I would start with nothing, and maybe this painting over here is starting with nothing and having no narrative. It was the first time I broke from the pandemic and went to the beach and wasn't prepared that there would be people having a good time at the beach and breaking the rules. You weren't even allowed to go to the beach, right? But at midnight, there was this full moon. There was phosphorescence in the water, and they were making this kind of phthalo blue type foam. And then I took my clothes off because I wasn't prepared to swim and went swimming and under the moonlight and the phosphorescence. And I drove back like kind of like crazy, elated, like what just happened? I feel like I didn't notice I was not alive, you know, that moment. But most of my paintings start out with a idea of what colors do I want to see? How do I want to feel? I want to feel good, right? I don't want to keep perpetuating a attachment to my worst experiences. So that's what I'm working at now, more so than when I was in my late 30s in my darkest times.
What's compelling about that painting for me, Thomas, is the gaze between the two characters. There's such an intensity of their visual connection with each other. It's really powerful.
Thanks.
So
I accidentally made two pairs of glasses there that the little guy's wearing, and I
yeah,
see that as myself, even though it doesn't look like me that much, but I guess it is me. I was born with dark curly hair, so I feel like maybe those glasses are about expanding and getting a bigger view of understanding different aspects of myself.
the red circle and the steering wheel and how they're both holding on to it, and kind of a circle of life, of change, has a lot of possible meanings, which is always wonderful in a narrative when you can see something that has many different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, there's always seems to be some water. I grew up in Rhode Island, where luckily I could walk down the hill and go to the bay, Mount Hope Bay. And whereas everything else around me was, quarter acre or smaller lots leading up to triple deckers a few blocks away. Triple deckers, as we say in Massachusetts, with, that much space between the houses. So it's kind of a magical place. I feel like I grew up where it was a little nook where you can choose your reality depending on which direction you walk. In a few blocks, you could be, next to teenage mothers and heroin addicts, or you could go to the woods, to go down and throw rocks at cans and play in the water surrounded by just trees. So, yeah. Well, I don't know if anybody else has anything to say. I don't want to keep people too long, but time really went by easily for me. I don't know. Does anybody have something to say? They want to?
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I just feel really fortunate. I've curated I don't know how many shows, I guess 4 or 5. And this is the first time it felt kind of like I was writing about it, and I felt like I was writing about like a rock band, or, like, these are the members in our band playing together. We come from, different backgrounds. This guy plays bluegrass, and this guy's from a jazz background or opera. Anyway, yeah, I feel a lot of kinship with everybody in the show. And
Yeah, thank you for setting this up, Thomas. It was so interesting to hear what everyone had to say.
Yeah, and I feel like this pandemic and the Black Lives Matter and the sort of sharing that occurred with that really helped culture, the white culture in particular, all the culture, but, kind of a dialogue that people were having that was so much a topic of, I don't know if I can talk about this type of thing. And I think that expands into lots of other topics that may not have been topics of conversation, like even seeing some people at like a Trump rally that are from like Antifa or Black Lives Matter, and they're talking, and they're, even though there's such violence and dissonance, there's also a lot of potential because of the amount of interaction that wasn't occurring before. Of course, that leads to a wide range of outcomes from those interactions, but this putting the show together made me realize how much has transpired over the past few years. Yeah. So yeah, thanks. I'm glad so many of us could get here. I wish more even, but it's nice to be able to have time to get everybody to get a decent amount of information to us on whether our guesses about each other we're right. We're in line. But yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch and staying close with everybody here and getting closer, interacting more. So
Thank you, Thomas. Great show.
thank you, Om, for being the sort of foundation for this to be built on, and making this available, and doing all this extra work for these extra events.
My pleasure.
Next week, I'm doing a performance in the 3:00 in the afternoon here, Pacific time. And that's another thing that sort of became a process of reaching out to the community, because I'm going to be kind of looking around at people outside my tent with my little robot sculpture. The robot sculpture actually makes me think a little bit of Kata's main figure too, but this kind of abstract painting eye, kind of like the New York modernism. I have a love-hate relationship with that kind of art, and I love looking at it, but I also hate the sort of dominance of that at the exclusion of communicating something in artwork. But I would go into the tent and draw and meditate, and then come out and invite people to come in and also experience that. And putting the tent out in the parking lot is on the west side in particular, when Venice Beach and these elections are all about homelessness and how are we going to get these people off the streets. So that's all these kind of odd convergences that I feel like will be fed into what I do next weekend.
Great.
That's great. Yeah. We'll follow that with a sort of an informal reception afterwards in the gallery.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to walk through
second look.
Yeah, give people a more of a insights into each piece.